general del CIDE, y Dr. Laborde, director de Estudios sobre Desarrollo, for the invitation to be part of this important panel. It's a pleasure to welcome into this session on the economic impacts of global trade tensions. In recent years, we have seen significant changes in international trade dynamics, with increasing trade barriers and adjustments in global supply chains. This discussion is essential to understand how these policies affect the global economy, especially in North America. Today, we are fortunate to have two distinguished experts who will help us analyze these effects using advanced economic models and solid data. Let me introduce our esteemed speakers. Erwing Corong is Principal Research Economist and Associate Director at the Center of Global Trade Analysis at Purdue University. He manages the construction programs for a number of GTAP databases and contributes to land use data. Since joining GTAP in 2015, Erwing recorded the standard GTAP version 7 model called Jetpack and converted all GTAP suite of models to align with this current version. During the last 5 years, he developed a number of GTAP models, including GTAP MRI, GTAP DM, domestic margins, GTAP DS, domestic support, the GTAP direct dynamics of models, and recently GTAP RG trade for the European Commission of DG trade. He also developed models such as GTAPHS harmonized system, standard GTAPRD, and the World Trade Organization Global Trade Model. Erwing is currently working on the GTAP Integrated Assessment Model, EAM, for climate policy analysis. His research focuses on agricultural domestic support, international trade, non-tariff measures, domestic trade and transport margins, economic, energy, environment interaction, poverty, inequality, and sustainable development issues. He obtained his dual undergraduate degree in economics and business management from the La Salle University, Philippines, and PhD in economics from Monash University in Africa. Dominique van der is research professor at the Center for Global Trade Analysis at Purdue University. His research focuses on analyzing economic policy of a global nature, such as multilateral trade agreements and climate change. He is an expert on global general modeling. His policy work has included analyzing agricultural support policies in the OECD countries, the Uruguay Round Agreement, and the proposed Doha Agenda International Migration, the Trump administration initiated trade wars, carbon mitigation policy, and the economic impacts of climate change. He is the developer of the managed single country CGE model, the envisaged global CGE model, the standard GTAP model in GAMS, global CGE model, and he's currently working on a version of the later that incorporates sub-regional economics, such as the US states. Prior to joining Purdue University in 2014, he worked at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the World Bank, and Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. He has an undergraduate degree in mathematics from the University of Uruguay in Belgium, and a PhD in economics from the University of California at Berkeley. Now, I will hand it over to our speakers who will guide us through today's presentation. First, they will provide an overview of recent tariff policy changes, followed by an analysis of their economic impacts. And finally, they will discuss future research directions. And Dominique, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Thank you very much for the invitation. We are very happy to have this opportunity to present both our center, which we just call it GTAP. We don't spell it out, but that's fine. We just call it GTAP. GTAP. So I'm going to introduce GTAP first, maybe 5 or 10 minutes to tell you what we do. And then Erwin will talk a little bit about the current turmoil in trade policy. So GTAP was founded a little over 30 years ago in the early 1990s, really as a consequence of the Uruguay round of multilateral trade, because it was kind of the first time that computers were ready to look at these big multilateral trade deals. And so it was an outcome of the work going on the Uruguay round, but a lot of this was also used for the first NAFTA agreement. We also did much work on the USMCA under Trump 1. So it's a research organization based at Purdue University, really trying to improve economic analysis of global trade issues. Next. You can do it. Oh. Is the presentation up?
That's coming.
It's just zero. Well, I always like to brag that there is not a trade minister in the world that does not know GTAP, yeah? Because any agreement, a trade agreement of any sort, always uses GTAP to some extent. El tercero. Una más. Sí, gracias. So what does GTAP do? The thing that we're best known for is the database. So this is a database of the global economy for the, is everyone here an economist in this room?
Mostly.
Okay. So basically, the core of the database are country level input-output tables. Okay. So we have, we collect all these input-output tables. We merge that with external data, things like emissions, energy volumes, agricultural data from the FAO, bilateral trade from UNCTAD, and so we merge all of this to create the database. So it's a huge amount of work, and we'll give you a little bit more detail in the next few slides. The database is important, but then once you have the database, you want to model as well, right? You want to be able to do analysis. So we provide models of the database that are available for free. The database you have to pay for, but the models are free. So you can download the models and do your own work. We have our own journal. I'll talk a little bit about that as well. We have events during the year, but the most important event for us is the annual conference, which can be anywhere in the world. Last year it was in Colorado. This year it's in Kigali, in Africa. We've done it in Cartagena, in Colombia. That was wonderful. Santiago as well. So maybe one day here in Mexico, yeah? That's the, and then the other critical thing that we do is GTAP-U. So that's our educational support. So we train people in how to use the database and how to use the models. La próxima.
Next.
For a university center, we have a very interesting governance structure. We have an advisory board, okay? And the advisory board is composed, it's hard to see on that map, but it's composed of agencies all around the world, all right? So we have 4 US agencies, for example, Department of Agriculture, Department of Commerce, International Trade Commission, and the Environmental Protection Agency, European Commission, the Japanese government, the Chinese government. But we also have on the board many international agencies. So the World Bank, the IMF, the OECD, the FAO, various UN agencies. In Latin America, we only have 1 board member, and that's the BID, the Inter-American Development Bank. Again, we would certainly welcome anyone who would want to be part of the board from Mexico. It comes at a cost. The board members provide us with $20,000 each year to support our activities. But they also get the database for free, and they get the early databases and things like that. But for a university center, it's a very interesting structure. Yeah. La próxima. Next. Gracias. So the other important feature is the network, La próxima, which is right now over 30,000 people in some 180 countries, I think. Covering the globe. The network is important because it provides people with discussions. It provides them with collaboration. It's a very interactive. I think Gaspar, you have participated in some of the activities in the network, yeah. So it's a very important feature of GTAP. Next. So here's a little bit about the data. All right. So when we got started 34 years ago, GTAP 1 had just 13 regions. It covered the globe, but it was using aggregate, big aggregate regions. So Latin America was probably just one region. Since then, we have continually been increasing the country coverage. So you can see for Latin America now, we cover just about every country. All the green shaded areas are countries that we currently cover. The yellow we don't, but there are very few yellow ones left on this map, yeah? In Latin America, I think it's just Guyana and Suriname. But every other country is covered. Even in the Caribbean, we have Jamaica, Haiti, Dominican Republic. I don't know if there are others. Trinidad and Tobago. So we very extensive country coverage. The dark green are the most recent additions. And we've been doing a lot of work with our colleagues in Africa to improve the country coverage in Africa. And we're getting close, very close to 100% coverage in Africa. All right. Next.
Excuse me, Dominique, for Mexico, what's the last year you have?
Well, I'll have to look it up.
Oh, okay.
But we have that information, yeah. It's all this information on the website, yeah. But I'll take, okay, I don't know. So I've already mentioned some of the studies we do, but the work that we do internally, we do in collaboration often with other agencies. But we've done a lot of work on NAFTA and USMCA. I already mentioned that. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, which the US decided not to participate in. A lot of work on the African Continental Free Trade Area. We did a lot of work first on COVID, but then also on the post-COVID reshaping of global supply chains, et cetera. We've branched out significantly, working a lot more on environmental issues, notably climate change. So we do a lot of work on energy, emissions, carbon pricing policies. And we're looking at newer policies. I don't know if you're aware of them, but like the European Union would like now to tax imports. So taxing the emissions embodied imports, called the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. So if Mexico is sending energy intensive commodities to Europe, they're probably going to see an additional tax. So we're working on that. And we're looking at broader environmental issues as well, such as biodiversity and land use. Next. So I've talked a little bit about research. So the journal has been moving up a lot. I think the last I looked, we were ranked the 62nd most important economic journal. So out of 300 or 400, so it's not so bad. As most of us, our promotions are based on impact factors and things like that. The journal has gotten very heavily cited, so we're very, very happy with that. Next. And then GTAB-U. So we have different levels of courses. We have a very introductory course in CGE modeling, exclusively online. Our core course is that intermediate one. It's the GTAB annual short course. It's hybrid, so part of it's online, part of it occurs at Purdue. Students spend 1 week at Purdue. And then we have a more advanced one where we look at a dynamic version of the model, and then we have more specialized courses, and we're adding additional courses as we go. So I think it's a great resource that people would want to avail themselves of. Next, please. Okay, just a word on the center itself. We're very small. It's a staff of 12, 14 people. So we don't have a huge amount of people, but I think we're quite productive and quite well known internationally. So let me introduce now the work that we're going to present today. So this is work that does not have Wednesday night's tariffs, because we haven't had time yet to digest Wednesday night tariffs. So it's more based on what the Trump administration had said that they were going to do during the campaign. So 10% uniformly across the world. Actually, you're presenting a more specialized one, but we've looked at different scenarios. But we've done the 10% global with 60% against China. But what Erwin's going to present today is more than 25% between Canada, Mexico, and the U.S., which he had imposed for a day or two and then suspended. So that's the one that we're going to focus on today. So we're going to focus really on the impact from Mexico and Canada. All right, so that's the main project. But we will continue working. Well, I'm sure sometime in the next few weeks we'll already have some analysis of Wednesday's analysis. Good. Next, please. Oh, it's a different presentation. Yeah. Oh, yeah, the next presentation. Are there any questions on GTAB, the center?
I have a one.
Sure. Okay, so the input-output tables, we always use the latest available, okay, for any country. All right. So some countries are very good at publishing new input-output tables. So China is every year. Korea is every 2 years. The US, every 5, every 10, maybe. So we always use the latest. But we have some tables that are 20 years old right now.
It could be a good idea to contribute with one.
So for Mexico,
as soon as we get it,
yeah, I just checked for Mexico. It's based on 2013 base year data.
2013?
Yes.
No.
Is there a more recent one?
No, he's talking about your database, right?
No, but
No,
so we use a Mexican IO table,
We
and
already
the one
have-
we're using is 2013.
Okay, but we already have the 2018.
Okay. Be in touch with us, and we can, yeah, absolutely.
We can work
Now,
on that.
Even though the IO tables are out of date, or they're dated, we price adjust them to the national accounts published by the World Bank and IMF and OECD, yeah? So they're always, that's just a price adjustment. You just scale everything up, yeah? And you just assume that the technological coefficients are constant. But then we also introduced, the bilateral trade for that year, okay? So the trade is updated. The energy and emissions are updated. The agricultural production data is updated. So there are structural adjustments that occur with the country IO table based on the external assumptions we're making about trade, agriculture, and energy. All right. So it's not fully static.
Okay. Okay. So from here on, I'll just present something that we did way back in February. This is when the current Trump administration proposed imposing 25% tariffs on the U.S., on Canada and Mexico, and 25% of all goods except energy, which have been with 15%. So next slide, please. So I skipped some of the initial slides, but this is how we carried out the analysis. So we used the latest GTAP 11 database with the 2017 base year. We are currently working on a newer database, which should come out at the end of this year publicly. We have it at Purdue, and we are still improving on the final release. So in terms of tariffs, since it is a 2017 base year data, we had to update some of the tariffs that were implemented in 2018 and now. So we did that using this database called CARD, which looked at all the tariff implementations from 2017. And then after that, we used the database in the model, in the standard GTAP model. And we ran some simulations, and the scenario are in the scenarios are in the next slide. And these are the two scenarios that we ran way back in February. So the U.S. imposes 25% tariff on all imported goods from Canada and Mexico. And if the existing tariff is lower than 25%, then we increase it to 25%. And all energy goods from Canada are imposed 10% tariff. For scenario 2, we didn't have any idea yet at that time on what the retaliatory tariffs will be to be imposed by Canada and Mexico. So we went with whatever the U.S. is imposing. Both Canada and Mexico will also impose in a retaliatory. Okay, so just the initial tariff rates before the implementation. So you'll see that for Mexico, Mexico is imposing about 0.37% tariff rate on U.S. imports, while it faces about 0.29% tariff on exports of Mexico to the U.S. So this is on average. And as you can see, the initial tariff rates are quite low. Next slide, please. This is just to give you, to situate the inter-regional trade across U.S., Canada, and Mexico. And as you can see, that for the U.S., its imports from both Canada and Mexico are roughly equal. It's about almost 50% from Mexico and again Canada, whereas for Mexico, its imports from the U.S. relative to Canada is significantly higher. And Canada also, its imports from the U.S. is significantly higher compared to its imports from Mexico. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we go to the impacts. So just to remind you, the initial scenario is that the U.S. will impose tariffs on Canada, on goods from Canada and Mexico. The second scenario, which is shown here in orange, is the retaliatory tariff when Mexico and Canada also imposes the same amount that the U.S. is imposing. As you can see, if This is at the global level. When the US imposes tariffs on both Canada and Mexico, global GDP will decline by a small amount. But when there are retaliatory measures, then the impacts at the global level are roughly doubled. Right? What's important to see here, even though the impacts are quite small, is that the impacts of tariffs would result in higher production costs, right? So imagine that this is just between or among Canada, US, and Mexico, but regardless, there's still an impact. And as we all know, when tariffs are being imposed, then cost of production and then cost of consumer goods will increase. Next slide, please. Here we break down the relative GDP impacts across the three countries. And then for Mexico, it's about 1.1% reduction in real GDP in the medium term. If the US imposes tariffs, whereas if there are retaliations by Mexico, then the real GDP decline over the medium term is about 3%. Next slide, please. Here we show the trade volume impacts. So overall, when we look at exports, overall exports of Mexico, we see that it roughly follows what happens to GDP, but by a larger amount, right? So we notice that if the US is only imposing tariffs, then there will be a reduction in Mexican exports by about 14%, whereas if Mexico also imposes tariffs, then exports will fall by about 25%. Imports will fall a bit larger compared to exports, and partly this is because when we run the model, we impose a closure, what we call closure, wherein we say that the amount of imports that you can buy significantly depends on the amount of exports revenue that you earn. So in this case, you see that since there are tariff implementations, then Mexico will reduce its imports and will consume more domestic goods relative to imported goods, which are now relatively more expensive. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is just the trade price impacts, and we see that when there are tariffs, of course, countries will try to reduce their prices so that they can sell more to their bilateral partners, and you can see here that the export price index would fall for Mexico, especially in the case where it is only the US that imposes the tariff. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is, we are now going into the more micro level impact, and we see that on average, employment will fall across the three countries. And for Mexico, it's about 2% reduction in overall unemployment or overall employment. And if there is retaliation, there would be about 3.4% reduction in employment over the medium term. And then in this next slide, we just look at the impacts and we disaggregate the total employment impact into skilled and unskilled employment. And you will see that it's unskilled labor that is impacted more than skilled labor, partly because the unskilled labor don't have much capacity to move around and be employed elsewhere. And it's also partly driven by the economic structure. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is just in terms of agriculture and food volume. We see that almost in all major agro-food sector, there is a reduction in food exports to the US. There's a slight decline in other crops, but since these are in percentage changes, note that other crops have a very small base. So it's a very small amount of, there's a very small amount of food exports of other crops from Mexico to the US. And then next slide, please. And as you can see, overall imports would fall. Overall imports of Mexico would fall because of tariff policies. Next slide, please. Okay, and in the previous one, the reductions are not as large because Mexico is diversifying its exports based on the simulation results. But if you only look at the US and we just let the model play out what the tariff impacts will be, then there will be a stronger reduction in food exports in the US. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to summarize what we have done so far. So we always use the GTAP data and modeling framework whenever we analyze global, national, and global trade policy issues. The GTAP modeling framework facilitates detailed analysis of impacts of trade policy changes because we can go from we can go analyze the results from the macro level all the way to the sectoral level and how those policy changes impact the labor market and household consumption in the tariff policies have wide-ranging national and global impacts, and eventually it could result in changes in existing trade patterns if the tariff policies are more permanent than not. And we are in the process of analyzing the recently announced tariff policies to better understand the national and global economic impacts of these recent tariff policy changes. Thank you.
So I would like to, a pleasure to hear you. I know that this kind of methodology is regional database, so it's difficult sometimes to manage. I could say that against the versions of the visions that these days we could see in the media, we could say that USA is not very underdeveloped. Is economy. I can see that Mexico and Canada they are in the worst situation with these tariffs. So I have just a question. I know that you don't did this study with the things that happen to these things, but how much you can change the results with the tariffs that in the world we can see in the media that from people. How much do you see? Are the same results?
Well, I think we're going to see much more radical shifts in demand, output, employment impacts with the proposals Wednesday night. One striking thing about Wednesday's proposals is the diversity of the proposed tariffs across regions. And we know that the economic distortions that come with very different taxes is much, much higher than having uniform taxes. So an average 10% tariff has a very different impact if it's uniform or if it's 90% on one country and 1% on another country. All right. And it's really striking at how much diversity there is in there. I read an article in the Washington Post today. It was very interesting. The funny thing about Trump, and we worked a fair amount with people in the Trump administration, in this first administration, they like to have numbers and they like their numbers to be economically viable. All right. So they're not trying to make things up. And so it turns out, reading this article, what they did Wednesday was trying to assess what the optimal tariff is against each country, using estimates of trade elasticities and shares and things like that. They made a lot of heroic assumptions in doing that, but they were using, published material from the literature, including from one of our colleagues at Purdue. But they're obviously misusing that information to do this. But the funny thing about this is that Trump had announced that Liberation Day was for reciprocal tariffs, but reciprocal tariffs are very different from optimal tariffs. Yeah. So it looks like they decided to use optimal tariff theory, but that has nothing to do with reciprocity.
I would like to ask from our audience if you have any questions, comments.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Isai from the DPP, the PhD of Public Policy. I missed the first part of the presentation, so I have a question of how can access to the databases of this?
So the database is available on our website, but it's behind a paywall. So people pay to use the data. You have to pay a license. I don't know. We had different prices for academics, non-academic, different prices for developing countries versus non-developing. So I don't remember what the prices are right now, but they're different categories. Most of the other thing that we post on the website is free. So if you want to use the model, you can download the model and just, well, you need a license for GenPack, yeah.
For the software, yes.
For the
But
software.
if it's a small aggregation, then it will work.
That's a little, can I make a comment?
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, that's a little inconvenience. I don't know how much of a problem it is because we're working with GAMS, GAMS. So the GenPack, it looks like working in a very different way.
Yeah, so there's a version of the model in GAMS, which you can download from the website as well.
Oh, great.
I can send you the link for that if you're interested.
And we also distribute the database in GTX. So you can directly use it.
Yeah, access it directly from GAMS.
Yeah.
Using GTX.
Yeah. I also have a version of the model in Julia.
Oh, Julia.
Julia is free.
That's what we were thinking about because I am interested in the, this institution is particularly interested in education. So GAMS is pretty expensive. Yeah, GenPack, I don't know, the GAMS, you need like $7,000.
Yeah, I think GenPack is similar, I think. Yeah.
One individual license.
Yeah.
Which is pretty expensive. And Julia, it looks like a very good option, so that you can work with all the students and not only of this institution, but the whole country and other countries too.
So I can send you the Julia code.
That would be great.
But I'm not a Julia expert, so.
Neither do I. I don't think we have been working with Julia, but I was searching for an option, and Julia looks like a good alternative.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to comment something about these 25% tariffs announced by Trump. I made an exercise, roughly speaking, with this 25% tariffs translated into 25% decrease in exports, assuming unitary elasticity, because I spent one morning looking for the elasticity price for automobiles in the United States, and I found from elastic to non-elastic and unitary also. So I decided this was to assume 25% decrease in exports from Mexico to the rest of the world, because I think more than 80% of Mexican exports go to the United States. Then I use the simple Leontiev model to diminish exports in 25%. And then I use the computer applied general equilibrium model that I've been working on for 10 years. And I was pleased to find that results from both models are very similar, between 7 and 8% for the overall aggregated value of a country, of Mexico. So this is a single country model, so small country, etc. Then I'm thinking aloud because I believe that a collaboration of this institution with the TITAP for the general, but TITAP in particular would be a great thing for our project. We have actually we are working on setting up a project which would include a battery of models from structural analysis to computable general equilibrium analysis. And that is something that I wanted to say here. And for you to know, I think it will be very interesting and something very valuable to our institution.
Thank you, Gaspar.
Thank you.
So what I didn't mention, that we're actually here this week at an international workshop being held at CIMIT outside of town. But we thought we would take advantage of being in Mexico City to reach out to different institutions and agencies here, because our relations with Mexico are not very strong right now. And
I'm grateful you reached also we have this event and hope this could be the beginning of the relationship.
That'd be great. That'd be great. So we had meetings yesterday at the CNA, Consejo Nacional Agropecuario. We were very interested in this work, and also at the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development with Santiago Arguello.
Because besides automobiles, which is the heaviest exporter from Mexico, the food industry is also a big player in the export business from Mexico to the United States.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting area also.
They have one advantage, or several advantages, I think, agriculture. One is that there's a lot less competition in the US for Mexican agricultural products, avocados and, winter season fruits and vegetables and things like that. There's a little bit of competition, but not much. Whereas an automobile, of course, you name the country. The other advantage, which comes out of Wednesday night's announcement as well, is that it's much easier to be compliant with the USMCA when you're exporting fruits and vegetables. Things like the rules of origin and stuff like that don't matter. That normally an avocado, you're not going to, if it was grown on a Mexican farm, it's Mexican, right? But if you're importing transmissions or axles or whatever car parts, well, it's a little bit more difficult. The weirdest part of the announcement was that beer manufacturers will have to pay the tariff, not because of the beer, but because of the aluminum can. So if they could show that the aluminum can is made in Mexico, it's okay. But if it's coming from the US, it's very odd.
Another question. So to conclude, I want to thank our speakers for sharing the expertise and all of your participation. We have seen how trade tensions are reshaping global trade and how economic models can help us measure these impacts. So this is an evolving issue, and it's crucial to keep following it closely. So thank you very much, Dominique.
Thank you. Good.
Erwing, and much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
I think that I hope that you enjoy Mexico.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, thank you.
How long you're gonna be in Mexico?
This is it. We leave, yeah. Well, we've been here all week, so
I see.
it's, for us, this is a long trip, actually. So,
Are you flying tomorrow?
yes.
Oh,
Thanks.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Good.
License.